All right, what's up, guys? On to the next module. We're on module 3, and this one's going to be focused on our beginner fitness and conditioning, or strength and conditioning. So, for the overview here, we're going to go over the 4 primary qualities that we're going to be looking at. Number 1, strength, speed and agility, conditioning, and injury prevention. Those are going to be our core 4. All right. And if you only focus in, dial in on these 4, then you're going to be at a good foundation for your season, for your upcoming season. So if everything that we've learned and talked about so far, if you found anything helpful and you're in our school community, please make a post. Let me know what you found helpful so far so that I can get a good gauge on what you guys need more of, need less of. I can tailor it specifically to you guys. And on top of that, if you have some teammates or friends, coaches that might be interested in what we're doing here, what we're learning about here, if you found it helpful, they will surely find it helpful too. And if they're on your team, ultimately you want to make sure that everyone on your team's leveling up at the same speed so that collectively we can all be better. So share this with 3 of your friends if you're able to. Otherwise, let's go ahead and jump into our first slide for strength. All right. Strength it's literally the ability to overcome force, right? I know strength can generally be associated with Bjorn and Eddie Hall, the big guys, the power lifters, strongmen, those types of guys. Rugby strength, I would say it's a bit different because I find it primarily helps with less injuries. And that's because our body is then able to, we have the strength, we have the armor in our body in order to take these impacts, to handle all these forces, and still remain healthy to run for 80 minutes every single weekend, right? So on top of that, so with more strength, we have less injuries. We're also better in our physicality, and we're dominant in the contact area. So you think of our ball carrying ability and our defensive capabilities, those are both going to be extremely associated, or strongly associated with our strength. And ultimately, what we need is a strong upper body. So think neck, traps, shoulders. That's our armor. And then a strong lower body. And that's going to be like your quads, your legs, calves, glutes, hips, and those areas. So the difference being between the two in terms of how you program it, strength for the upper body and building that armor is going to be a bit more hypertrophy. So more time under tension, more bodybuilding style of training in the gym. Whereas the lower body, we need to be athletic. We need to be fast. We need to be explosive. So, is it good to have big, strong legs? Yes, absolutely. But if the priority is to be as fast as we can, jump as high as we can, and drive your legs through contact, then we don't only need strength, but we need to have power. And power is strength applied quickly. So how fast can you apply the strength? And with big, if you only spend hypertrophy on your legs, they're going to be huge, but they're not necessarily going to be explosive. And that's one thing that a lot of strength and conditioning coaches don't understand. That's really what I want to highlight here. So ultimately, we do need to train your entire body. And with that, we need to make sure we're progressing in weight as the weeks and the months go on. So we can't be doing 100 pounds on bench for 12 months a year. Every single week, every single month, we got to be going up in weight. And that's a core principle for strength development is our progressive overload. So biggest takeaways is upper body, train like a bodybuilder, build your armor in your upper body, and then build athleticism and explosive qualities in your lower body, and you'll be in good hands. To close out thoughts for our strength session here, when we refer to upper body training for hypertrophy, think reps 5 to 12, probably four to 5 sets. You can push 6 if you're pretty advanced. Then lower body, we want to stay probably 1 to 5 reps, but we're looking to move as fastly, as aggressively, as explosively as possible. And because we're hitting lower reps, we can increase the number of sets to get a little bit more volume in there. So if you're thinking like box jumps, cleans, broad jumps, single leg work, all of that we can increase the weight, increase the bar velocity as much as possible, decrease the reps, but increase the number of sets. So next, we're looking at some speed and agility here. Easy reason to train speed and agility is if no one can touch you, then they definitely can't tackle you. All your best players, that especially best steppers in the game, those are going to be guys that are extremely agile. So they can be able to shake a defender really quick. They can make you think they're going right, but they're actually going to go left. And that's how you see those moments of Jerry 2i like dicing people up, even though he's only like 5'5", like 180 pounds. Doesn't need to be massive, doesn't need to be big to still be a great rugby player. And he shows it in his footwork. So there's a lot more that goes into the step rather than just the agility part, because it is a skill that you can set up that we'll talk about in the school community. But for what we're talking about, we basically just need to train speed and agility in 3 different ways. 1, train in a straight line. That's going to be our direct speed. That way we can train acceleration and top speed. 2, we need to train curvilinear sprints. So if you want to think of a slalom or just bending the line, we do that a lot in rugby. And defensively especially, that's something that people don't think of a lot. So as you're coming up as a defense and you're drifting out, that's literally a curved line. So if you're not training it, then you go out and attempt to do it, you're kind of running on flat feet. So it's something that we need to touch on in training that is easily overlooked. Lastly, we want to get some sharp cuts. So these angles can be think from a clock, right? A clock standpoint, we want to be training cuts at 10 o'clock. We want to train cuts at 9 o'clock. We can train cuts at 7 o'clock. That way we're getting exposed to all different types of directions. And the way that we can make it harder is we go faster vertically, like as we're going towards noon, and then we cut on all 3 of those angles, obviously on both sides. But ultimately, like, we don't want to just be training like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or, we want to get the open angles, we want to get the sharp angles and the deep angles. So to dive into that a little bit more, I think I even skipped over this point, but speed makes everything easier. So especially conditioning. If you hate conditioning, but you love sprinting, you love speed training, then it can make up for your conditioning. And the reason for that is if you have 2 athletes, one of which runs 18 miles per hour and the other runs 21 miles per hour, then they can exert the same effort and same intensity, but the one who sprints 20 or 21, whatever I said, miles per hour, they will cover more distance. And even though the 18 might be fitter, they could still, because he has a higher maximum velocity, that means his sub-maximal velocity is still equivalent to the 18 mile an hour guy who is pushing harder. So I hope that makes sense, that speed literally makes everything easier. It can get you out of, if you're in a bad position, you can make up for it because you can catch up to the guy, and it doesn't matter if he beats you on the outside because you can still go and chase him down. So it saves you from a lot of otherwise bad moments. how do we train this now? So obviously we know the reason why we want to be training speed and agility. We know the benefits of it now. So how do we do that? For our straight line running, we broke that into acceleration and maximum velocity, right? For acceleration, we probably want to, in our sprints, we want to train about 10 to 40 meters. I'd really almost say like 10 to 30 meters, but you can stretch it to 40. So with that, plenty of rest between every single rep. And that's going to be for all of these. The reason that we want plenty of rest, almost too much rest, is because if take it to the extreme of too much rest versus too little rest, if you get too little rest, then you're not going to be training the same qualities because you can't, because the limiting factor is your conditioning now. So if you're not fit enough to go into that next rep, then you won't be able to exert maximal force. You won't be able to exert maximal effort because you're too tired from the last rep. So we need to make sure that you're fully rested, too rested, so that going into the next rep, you can go 100% speed. There's no question about how much force you can exert. Because, if you're tired, you can still feel like you're exerting 100%. But if you're fatigued, you physically cannot reach maximum velocity or your max acceleration due to fatigue. So it's so important that you take plenty of rest between each of these reps. It's different if you're trying to train like tempo runs and you want to get like hard running in and you want to train your ability for recovering quickly between sets, but this is for strictly speed and agility. So acceleration, we're getting 10 to 30 meters per run. Maximum velocity, we probably want to hit between 50 and 80 meters per run. And that way we can get up to top speed. And, once you're pushing like 80 plus, it's really who slows down who slows down the slowest that wins like a lot of track meets. Because athletes, they'll get up to their true top speed, but it's hard to maintain that for an extended period. You probably only get a couple of seconds. So the window to hit that max velocity is going to be between 50 and 70 meters, 50 and 80 meters, all right, give or take. Curvilinear runs, we can space out how far the weaves come in and go. We can also train in a circle. We can play with the size of the circle for a weaker angle or a smaller circle for a stronger angle, a sharper angle. And if we do the slalom again, we can also space out those cones, so we have to go sharper weaves. So those are all different ways we can play with curvilinear sprints as well. And that one, as long as you can go full speed, full effort throughout the full rep and then rest between each of those reps, then I don't think the distance matters nearly as much because we're just trying to expose the body to different angles and different forces. For our cuts, again, we want to get our 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 7 o'clock, all of those in. And on top of that, we can also get more rugby specific if you want to add like any of the head fakes or have a ball in hand. But ultimately, we still want to make sure that we're training as fast as we can. We need to make sure that we're touching on all these angles. And with all of this, it's imperative that we're hitting everything with max intent. So for speed and agility, this I would say is even more important than anything else that we do because this can translate directly to the field. What we do in the gym doesn't always translate, but speed will always translate to the field. Agility will always translate to the field. It'll just make you that much more agile, that much quicker on your feet. And that's probably one of the most important buckets that we can fill for our rugby development. Next, going into our conditioning. Conditioning is obviously going to be a huge part of the game because if you are not fit enough to play the full 80 minutes, then that means the end of the time that you're in the game, the skills are going to drop, your mental fatigue is going to increase, you're not going to be thinking clearly, you're not going to be in the right position at the right time. The list goes on for the number of things that will go wrong if you're not fit enough to play. However, if you are fit enough to play, then that means you can, number one, play the full match. If you're the best player, but you can't last the full match, then you're essentially useless. Number two, skills won't drop. So think of our catch pass. If you just ran a Bronco and then you come back and try and do your catch pass, it's probably going to be a lot harder than if you just now showed up to practice. And on top of that, our conditioning is just going to make sure that we can continue our high speed running and we're not in any moment of walking or jogging into position. And to get in a proper position means that we're in alignment defensively and attack, and we're not wasting any opportunities that we would otherwise miss. So to gain fitness for rugby specifically, our conditioning sessions, they need to replicate the game. So it's, like I said, it's an 80-minute match. There's a lot of accelerations. There are moments of top speed, of max velocity, but there's going to be a lot of running at 75% speed for majority of the time with little quick bursts multiple times per game. So with this in mind, we probably need to train very similarly. One method of which I really enjoy, first of all, we're talking about enjoying conditioning. If you just play high intensity touch, high intensity scrimmage during practice, that can be a form of conditioning because you're literally doing what you're going to be playing on Saturdays. Right? So that's probably the best way to do it. The most effective way that we could touch on it, I believe, are mass runs. And that's essentially maximal aerobic speed. What that means is how fast can I go so for our context, it's just going to be running for 15 seconds, trying to cover about 75 to 85 meters per run. Rest for 15 seconds, and then repeat that. So 15 seconds to get down, rest for 15, 15 seconds to get back, rest for 15. We're going down and back 8 times in total. And we could hit that for about 2 sets, right? So that's probably really, that alone is a great workout. Your first time doing it, it's going to suck. I remember my first time doing that, and I literally got to like the end of my first set, and I needed like 8 to 10 minutes before I started that second set. And then even the second set, I was like, oh my God, this is miserable. But nowadays when I do it, I'll go 10 reps. I'll get 2 or 3 sets in. Still sucks, obviously. It's conditioning, but it's necessary. And I recognize that it's necessary. And us as good rugby players, we do what's necessary to put us in the best position that we can for our teammates, for our coaches, for ourselves, and to put on for the team. So for conditioning, we can use the Bronco as a measurement for how well conditioned we are. That's a standardized test across pretty much the entire rugby world that it's 5 suicides. You go 20 meters back, 40 back, 60 back 5 times. And you're trying to do that as quickly as you can. It's close to about 3/4 of a mile, and you got 30 or so turns in there, 30 or so reaccelerations. And we have a resource guide in our classroom page that you can take a look at and see where you rank amongst the world-class standards for your position. So obviously, like a prop is not going to be nearly as fast or expected to be as fast as your scrum half or your fly half. So take a look in the resource tab, run your Bronco, see where you rank, and based on that, we can tell you whether you need to work on your conditioning or not. Injury prevention. This is a tricky one because there's no such thing as injury prevention. there is such thing as injury reduction, or increasing or decreasing the likelihood that you'll receive an injury. But there's no one thing you can do to literally prevent an injury. Most common injuries that you're going to face playing rugby are concussions, ankle sprains, rolling your ankle, knee injuries, the big ones, ACL, meniscus, LCL, the rest of them. Your hamstring, another soft tissue injury, pulled hamstrings, torn hamstrings, injuries to your face, shoulder, and groin. And the reason for that is these are the joints. These are the locations that receive the most impact, receive the most force, or they experience a lot of fatigue during the game. And the fatigue is what causes like groin pulls or hamstring pulls. So with this in mind, we can better understand how we need to structure our training in the gym in order to make sure we're not, or we make sure that we can limit our number of injuries on the pitch. So, number one, all of these joints, all of these muscle groups, we need to strengthen them in a full range of motion so that our body can withstand the aggressive forces in the game. And on top of this, with the fatigue that I just mentioned, they're both necessary for similar reasons. So, what do I mean when I say strengthen in full ranges of motion? Well, number one, like how often are you training your groin? Probably not very often compared to how much you're benching right now, right? If you lift weights, I know you're benching, and I know you're not training your groin. So then you get in to practice, and then you tweak right up near your hip, you tweak your groin, and you can't understand why. A lot of the reasons is whenever we're in a lengthened position, that's where the muscle is the weakest. And if you apply the same amount of force, then while it's in its weakest position, then it's going to be more likely to tear or pull just a little bit, right? So that's why we need to strengthen these areas in a full range of motion. So if I'm only training my arm from here to here, and I just keep hitting reps here, I'm missing everything from here to here. And this is the true lengthened position. And similarly, if you think of your hamstring, similar to your bicep, when you're going from toe off to knee to a high knee in that sprinting motion, that's the most often moment that you're going to see hamstring pulls, because the muscle is lengthening, it's experiencing a lot of eccentric forces, and a lot of the time it's just too weak to handle those forces, or it's too fatigued during the game to handle those forces. So we need to strengthen them in a full range of motion. That means full depth squats. That means loading in a lengthened position like RDLs. We're getting a good stretch in the hamstrings before we come back up. And that way our body experiences these forces before we get into the pitch. And then that's how we build a little bit of armor in regards to experiencing what we're going to see on the pitch, just in a controlled environment in the gym. Key to this is that good form is necessary, both in the gym and on the pitch. So if you have bad form on the pitch, like I mentioned, when it comes to concussions, injuries to the face, injuries to the shoulder, those are all moments that I think it's easy to articulate in a tackle. If you put your head on the wrong side, so we teach cheek to cheek. If we don't go cheek to cheek and we put your face out in front, then you're much more likely to catch a knee to your eyebrow. So if you put your face on the wrong side and you catch a knee, then you're going to end up like this. And it's not fun, man. I literally thought I was leaking here, and I've already split this eyebrow open 3 times. Thought I was going to be going to immediate care to get some stitches and all this stuff. So tackle correctly, tackle with good form, and run good form like throughout all of your skills. not only is it going to keep you safe, but it's also going to make you excel. All the best players on the pitch, they all have good form, and that's why they're able to execute their skills so well. We want to spend about 1 or 2 times a week at the end of your workout sessions working on these areas. So in the gym, that's where we can get some Copenhagen's in. We can get some hip flexor strengthening in. We can get some calf work in. That way we're strengthening all these areas that would otherwise be susceptible to injury. An often overlooked muscle group is even your neck. A strong neck can decrease your risk for concussions. So why wouldn't you spend 1 or 2 times a week literally preventing a concussion, something that would otherwise take you out of play for weeks to months? It just makes sense. And the sessions, they don't need to be like fully dedicated sessions. They can literally be 2 or 3 sets, either at the beginning or the end of your workout, and then boom, you're done. Add another 15 minutes to your workout. What's an hour compared to an hour and 15 minutes? Like nothing. Get it in. On top of that, you can do this at training too, at practice. So before practice starts, you and your partner, you group up and you just work on some one-on-one tackling. He steps to the one direction. You run through our steps that we talked about in the previous module. We got our foot in the hoop. We're punching. We're driving. We got both legs. We're pulling them tight to our body. And we're finishing on top, right? So these are all things that we can do that are in our control to make sure that we're preventing that injury. We're reducing the likelihood that we sustain an injury. And I can't exaggerate how important this is, because like similar to conditioning, how if you're not fit enough to play, it doesn't matter how good you are if you're not fit enough to play. On top of that, it doesn't matter how fit you are or how good you are if you're literally injured. If you're injured, you can't play and you're useless. The best ability is availability. So do what's within your power to make sure that you're available every single weekend, ready to lace the boots up and run out on the pitch with your team. Time to take action. This is our 3rd time taking action. This is our 3rd module. We're now at a point that we should be very deep in the actions we've performed now. Our previous one, we had to work on our skills. The first one, we're starting conversations with teammates and coaches. Here, we want to create a weekly training template so that we can know exactly what we're working on what day, so that we're guaranteeing that we're filling each of our buckets. If we're doing this intuitively, then we could really be missing buckets. And that's what's going to limit you as a rugby player. That's the problem with training intuitively. If you have a clearly defined weekly training schedule, you can ensure that what you're doing every single day is all in the pursuit of getting us from where we are to where we need to be. And the best way to do that is creating this weekly training template. We need 2 to 3 gym sessions, ideally not stacked every day, and also not on the same days as field sessions. Field sessions being team training, speed, agility, and conditioning. In some situations, you can do that, but the caveat to that is if we need to overlap days, which I do, I overlap my days, we need to do them in a structured manner, that of which is if you hit legs, you either have to hit legs or your lower body in the gym after your field session. So we want to separate legs in our session or in our field session, ideally by a day, or you can hit field session, then gym session. Okay. On top of that, I know looking at this with 3 gym sessions, 3 field sessions, that would imply that we need to train 6 days a week. That's not true. We could also go the high-low approach, where our high days are high, our intense days are intense, and our low days are resting, and we can actually recover on those days. So if this is a lot to take in and organize and schedule, let me know. We can schedule a one-on-one call and we can just create this together. I've already done this with, I would say 10 of our members inside the community. And you can look at the community posts where guys just talk about how helpful it was just jumping on a call. There's literally no thinking that they need to do. All we do is they tell me what their current schedule is. They tell me, and that's like top to bottom from the moment you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep. A lot of guys, they struggle with prioritizing this for time. And I think time is a huge excuse because instead you're just not prioritizing properly. So I can help you find time in your schedule to get what you need to get in so that we take you from where you are up to where you need to be. And this is what we do because it's necessary. It's not because we want to. It's not because we feel like it. It's literally necessary to go from point A to point B. In other words, you can't expect to be a world-class player if you don't hit the gym and if you don't hit the field and you don't train your skills, right? I know you already knew that, but I think we can sometimes kid ourselves into thinking that we're doing enough when we recognize what we're doing is down here and what's enough is up here, but what's actually achievable and what's actually possible is all the way up here. So point is, either create this on your own, take 20 minutes, map it out, know exactly what you need to get in. We'll even show you, this is my weekly training schedule here. I got it all on my whiteboard, and that tells me exactly, like Monday, I'm hitting a workout with max velocity. Tuesday, I got upper body weights, and I'm training the university team. Wednesday, I'm hitting plyos, and so on. So there's no question about what I need to do when I need to do it, because I stick to the schedule because I know it works. So if you need help, schedule a one-on-one call with me, and we're going to make this happen, and we're going to make you the best rugby player you can possibly